grew up in the Pacific Northwest, was born and raised there, went to school in Minnesota, met my wife there. We have 3 kids. I studied broadcasting, biblical studies, and minored in history in school, and then promptly went into insurance, which had no relation to anything that I have studied. But I suppose that's the case with a lot of people. You just never know where life's going to take you. And so I've had a small business as an insurance agent for a little over 20 years now, working in that, and so have enjoyed that field and continue to work in that today. So that's my quick background. As far as qualifications for this sort of thing, I've always been interested in politics since I was a kid. I would say I was kind of a strange kid who would go to events or watch things that were politically oriented and really enjoyed them. And I've always been fascinated with government, how it can help people and also how it can hurt people when it's out of line and out of place, and that history is full of that. And so in all the things that I have done, I've been on school board a couple of terms. I've enjoyed that. I've been elected to other offices as well. I was elected as a delegate to the State Republican Convention a number of years ago, and have been active in writing and speaking and working in a variety of events like that. So I've got a lot of experience in the issues that come up and how they affect people's lives. And so for me, it's important that government remain in its place. And I think the issue with government is we see it at the federal level, we see it at the state level, and even sometimes at the city level. And I've got examples from other cities that I really won't get into right now. But when government tries to do everything, it really loses the ability to do anything well. And so it is important that government really focus on what it can do well, which is protect people's rights, especially from those who would harm them, and really aiding in infrastructure in an effective community that way, that we can travel around and move and do business with each other and serve each other the way that God intended. And so having a business environment that is good through government, just allowing people to work well with each other, is something that's very important to me. And I've got a lot of experience in this area in business, as well as how government really can make people's lives better and sometimes make them worse, and how we can avoid that happening.
I was born and raised right here in Texas. I didn't grow up in a household, our home didn't have a lot of money, right? So when we grew up, my dad always made sure that we had food on the table and there was a roof over our head. And it's still just a great work ethic into us. And our mom was the one who always made sure we were in church every week. So I say that because when I turned 18, I joined the military and served. So there's no question in my willingness to serve. I was in the infantry. I was with the 25th Infantry Division. Pete was my boss at one point or another. That's in the back there. So he did a really good job, by the way. And so, again, I say my willingness to serve, right? I was willing to put my life on the line for this country because I love this country. We were grown and raised to have a sense of pride in our country and our state. I love this state. I love Texas, and I love Fort Worth. This is where I call home. So after the military, I went back to Iraq and worked for a private security company. The last position I held there was the director of logistics. I was over 400 personnel on one of the largest bases in Iraq, which was Balad. It was an Air Force base. And so after the military, I opened up a plumbing company. And in 3 short years, we were grossing over $1 million in sales. My background is running operations and is very business-minded, which in turn is very budget-minded, right? So when I say on city council, I've been involved in politics for quite a while, especially in the Tarrant County area. And it's fun, I love it. But this was an opportunity, when Firestone announced that he wasn't running again, this was an opportunity to actually make a difference in our everyday lives, in our own backyard. That's why it's so important on these municipal races that we have somebody and we vote to get the vote out. That's so important because unlike DC politics and everything else, these are the elections that are going to really affect our lives. So with my business background, that's one of the things that I want to bring to this, and bring a budget-minded aspect to City Council.
I live in Northcrest, just down the street. My husband James and I have been married for 20 years. We have 2 boys, and George is about to be 17 and Charlie's 14. I am from Port Neches, Texas, and I grew up stocking my grandfather's grocery store shelves at the age of 12. and had that job all the way through high school until I came to TCU. I have 3 degrees from TCU, undergrad, a Master's of Business Administration, and an MLA, which is a Master's of Liberal Art. I'm currently the president of Tailwind Philanthropic Advisors. I work with families that want to make charitable investments in our community. So I understand everything from homelessness, the issues we face in public policy, early education, higher ed, and I continue to serve our community and have for quite a while. So I've been on the Homeless Commission back when Mayor Mike started it, before it was Directions Home. I'm on the Sports Commission. I'm part of the Salvation Army. So I really understand the issues that affect our community. And James and I are working hard to make sure our boys have that same strong work ethic as well. I'm really focused on the quality of life here. We have a great city. Let's make sure we keep it that way. And that's what my focus is. Let's look at the infrastructure issues we have. Let's look at our property tax rates. Let's take a look at our response times for our police. I'm really passionate about public safety and making sure that our police and fire know that they have our backing. They have the resources they need to do their job effectively and efficiently.
What can and should be done to encourage voter participation in local elections?
If you can figure that out, that's the golden question, you'd be a millionaire, right? If we get more voters out, that's, oh God, you hit the lottery at that point. So I think everybody has a little bit to do in that, right? So it's telling your neighbors, it's social media. You don't have to go political, right? You don't have to choose a party, but you can tell people, hey, get out and vote, because it is important. I just said that, right, about municipal elections, right? It's so important because this is what's going to affect your lives. So everybody has a little piece of that to do, right? If your HOA meetings, things like that, bring it up, go out and vote. You're not telling them who to vote for. You're not picking a side or anything. You're just telling them, get out the vote. The GOTV, get out the vote. And that's important. So, regardless of whatever party you're involved with, Democrat or Republican, right? We have precinct chairs. That's part of their job, is they're supposed to go out. They're supposed to canvass neighborhoods. And I will encourage everybody out here, if you've never volunteered on a campaign, do it. It's fun. It's fun to get behind a candidate. It's fun to go help them out. It's fun to go knock doors because you actually get to hear and listen to the people and the issues. And nothing's better than hearing the issues from somebody's doorstep, right? You can poll all day long, but until you hear it from their actual mouth, it's important. And that's fun about getting involved. So, but at the end of the day, it's hard. Like municipal elections, their turnout is very low. But I think it's important that everybody has a job to push that, get everybody out, and it's just communication.
Actually, I think it starts at the neighborhood level. What you're doing tonight is voter interaction, and that's what we need. Democracy needs to have interaction between the candidates and the voters. Getting involved in your neighborhood association, being vocal, going to city council meetings and listening what's going on, but don't just go to the meetings, get involved. Find a task force, find a committee to be on, and I think that helps pique interest in what's happening in our city and our politics, and that will help bring voters and cultivate new voters.
There is intense pressure to commercialize all neighborhoods. Describe your position on short-term rentals and similar vehicles. They have all kinds of different names, but short-term rentals in zoned residential neighborhoods.
I oppose short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods that are zoned single-family, and I support the city's current ordinance as voted on by City Council.
So it's hard. There's not a win-win, right? So when they zoned it into, say, commercial and in the entertainment district, it still upsets people. That was the biggest concern. When people turned out to the city council, that was the biggest concern, their complaints. Well, here's the issue, is I met with a person that lives on the lake, has a couple of acres. Her daughter owns the property right next door. And this would have been the prime spot for a short-term rental. Well, if she does this now, she'll be breaking the law. And this is the same person where her husband passed away and she uses that property to supplement her income. We know, everybody knows here our taxes are extremely high. And this is something where neighbors wouldn't even complain because neighbors don't even exist around her. She owns so much property. So I feel for those type of people. I think if we were gonna do anything, we should treat it like anything else. Like even if you owned 3 units or more, you pull a permit, right? And the city gets to decide. And when I say that, I actually talked to a few folks who are in favor of short-term rentals. There's an alliance out there, there's an organization. And they took it a step further and said, we would be okay even if we allowed the surrounding neighbors to approve something like this. Well, that's probably not gonna happen. And let's take it a step further and say, I live personally in a HOA. My HOA wouldn't even allow it, right? So when we talk about the property rights in Texas, you're taking that away. And I get that a lot of folks don't even want long-term rentals right next door to them. So there's not a win-win for everybody. I think the easiest approach would have been apply for a permit. It's a case by case because, like I said, this elderly lady that lives on the lake that nobody's around her, she should be allowed to do it. There's nobody around to complain about it. And so I think that's important. But to just say, no, we're going to forget about it, we're only going to allow it in these areas, I think is the wrong answer because you're still going to upset neighbors in those areas. So it's not a win-win. So I think the approach was, let's pull the permit, let's look at it on a case-by-case basis, just like we do with any other units. If you own anything other than three or plus units, you have to apply for a permit. You know, I've owned property in Fort Worth, rental properties, and you have to go to there's these rules. So we already have everything in place for that. So it's just short-term rentals can apply to the same thing.
Yeah, this is a big question, I know. I'm going to take a little bit different stance than Macy on this, and a story similar to Jason. And this really comes from my political philosophy, but I was out knocking on doors, I've knocked a lot of doors. Jason and I debated who had knocked more doors on the last one. But on one of those many doors, this person, similar story, they had been renting out, they lived near me, and had been renting out the mother-in-law unit for short-term rental. And they pay a lot in property taxes. And they were using that income to offset the property taxes. They had not had any complaints from any neighbors because they were renting out just to either single individuals or couples, and they screened everybody very well. All the neighbors, in fact, were fine in favor of it, but they have now been told they can't do that. So they've lost a significant income. So they've got a double whammy from the city. On one hand, they've got high property taxes, higher than most other areas. And on the second stance, they can't offset that with income that they were generating. And the question is, if the city tells you you can't do something, it needs to be a situation of infringing rights. Whenever government says no, you may not, or yes, you must, either way, they need to be protecting rights. So was anybody's rights being protected in this case? This is how I'm going to look at virtually anything that comes up in the city council, where we say you must or you must not, is whose rights are being protected. And the issue is, no one's rights were being infringed by them renting that out, as far as I can tell. If somebody has an example, I'd be interested to hear it afterwards. But because of that, they lost their right to use their property as they saw fit, but no one else was benefited or harmed by the city's decision, other than just them. And a lot of people like to come to Fort Worth and visit, and the ability to use short-term rentals, Airbnb, is pretty popular around the country. So the issue, it could infringe rights if they're plugging up the street with cars. That would actually infringe the rights of the neighbors if that was going on. And also if they were renting out the little places to 20 college students that just show up and party all night long, that would also infringe the rights, because the neighbors have a right to a neighborhood environment that they moved into. So that really is a right. But if that environment isn't being infringed, and the neighbors and the rentals are being treated with respect, and the tenants, even if it's for a weekend or whether it's for a year, the tenants are acting respectfully, I don't see how the government can say, no, you may not have that source of income, you may not stay there, just because you're renting it short term. So it needs to be more nuanced in saying, we will protect the rights of the neighbors and the owners of the house. And I think the city can do that with a different rule than what they have right now.
If you plan to work to reduce property taxes, how will you make up for that revenue? That's one way to look at it. We don't get this money, we need this money, how will we get it? Here's the other part. If you plan to cut waste or reduce services, say specifically what you plan to cut or reduce.
I mean, the city needs the money. But I've been saying this forever. This happened, even in the military, it happens government-wide. There's no incentives on our department heads to save money. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Our department heads spend every single penny that they can, if not more, so they can make sure they get that budget the following year, right? So I say this again, I feel like a broken record here. The city of Fort Worth, let's run it like a business for a little bit. If I ran my business like Fort Worth does, I'd go bankrupt and I'd be out of business. So let's focus on the budget. Let's incentivize our department heads to save money and do it up to standard. I'm not saying lower the standard. Follow your budget, do it up to standard, and if you save money, great. I'm okay with even bonusing you out, just like you would on a private sector. But we don't do that. We incentivize our guys to spend every single penny, and then so they can get the following budget the next year. And I think that's a big issue. We should run the city like a business for a little bit and watch our pennies and dimes and everything else just like you would a small business, so that any money saved needs to go back to the taxpayers. My priority will always be the hardworking families of Fort Worth, and it will always be the taxpayers. Any money saved needs to go back to the taxpayers. And that's having a responsible budget. And when I say a responsible budget, just because you get some numbers thrown in front of you doesn't mean you have to sign off on it. It's digging into things, actually looking at things and saying, is this right? Does this make sense? And signing off on it at that point. But we need to run the city like a business just for a little while so we can actually save money.
So if elected, I would vote to reduce the property tax rate. I got my property tax, it wasn't a bill today, but your appraisal values today. And there's 6 different tax entities listed on there. And the city makes up about 17% of your total tax bill. The city of Fort Worth brings about $500 million of sales tax revenue in. 70% of that is from tourism dollars of people that don't live in the city of Fort Worth. That money and increasing the economic development opportunities in Fort Worth can help us reduce our tax rate. We live in the cultural district. We have some really great opportunities. People come from all over the world to see our museums. I think we have an opportunity for new Fort Worth Economic Development Partnership led by Robert Allen to help us bring in new businesses that align with Fort Worth's values and morals and bring in and expand our commercial tax base.
Okay, so I have some very specific ideas on this. You asked for specifics. If you go to my website, electcalebackham.com, I've actually listed out a few specifics of what I do. I'll just highlight a couple of them. I think, first of all, though, you have to prioritize the idea of cutting taxes. If you're going to do it, it has to be in first. You've probably heard the analogy of the big jar and all the different rocks, and you put all the sand in, and there's not enough room for the big rocks. You put the big rocks in first, and the sand fits in later. That has to be one of the big rocks that you put in first, and you decide this is what you do, and then everything else is going to fall around it that can fall around it. And if something else doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit. I run a small business, I've been on the school board, I've done these things in the past, and that's what I would do now, is you just prioritize the idea. We are going to lower the tax base for people. Somebody today commented what Macy just said. They got their assessment and it doubled, and thankfully that doesn't happen to most people, I don't think, but it's just crazy how that's going to affect them. But I would get rid of some areas or reduce some areas to make up for the reducing the taxes. The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Department, I've mentioned that before. That's a department that is popular in a lot of big cities and around the country. I believe it's a focus that's wrong. It's a focus on identity, class that's assigned to people rather than competence and character. So it was started a few years ago. I don't think we should be spending any money on that. That's one area that I would reduce. The homeless issue, you can go to my website and see a little bit about how I would change the priority there. As sales tax revenues go up, the property tax revenues can come down proportionally as long as you've frozen the overall spending. The increase in sales tax, not even just the rate, but just the income from additional sales, like what Macy mentioned, as people come in and spend money, we are seeing our sales tax revenues rise. We could lower property tax revenues by a corresponding rate. Those are a few of the things that I would do specifically, and plus more, to actually reduce property taxes. If it's actually a priority, then we can do it.
Heavy and increasing traffic is common in many areas of District 7. As growth continues in District 7, how can traffic issues and access in and out of neighborhoods be anticipated and or mitigated?
I am all about protecting our existing neighborhoods and making sure that we're protecting our neighbors. Zoning cases that would come before City Council that included any kind of additional traffic would need to be looked at and voted against. We need to take care of what we have currently before we keep adding. There is an opportunity to have responsible development, that people are coming. We are going to have to develop Fort Worth a little bit more than we have now to accommodate everybody, but we have to do it responsibly, and that includes traffic studies. That includes making sure that all 9 different departments within the city are talking to each other and understanding what's happening. I don't think that's being currently done. The Real Estate Council put some recommendations. There was 12 different recommendations they put forward in front of the city. to help them understand how to make development a little bit easier on that side, but also to make sure that the communities understand what the issues are, and so they can talk to the appropriate department, but also understand that department is also talking to the 8 other departments to get the zoning done correctly. Again, you know, the streets are, I go out on White Settlement quite frequently, and I understand the issue. But again, we need to take care of what we have and make sure that we are building up our mobility to make sure we have the right response times for our fire and police, and making sure that we're just not continuing to damage the roads until we get them fixed.
I think what you guys are doing is great. You have the West Side Alliance, we have Northwest Alliance, there's some talk about doing the River District Alliance. So when these major projects go in, I'm always gonna go back and use you guys as a resource, because nobody knows better than the people actually living in this neighborhood, right? So District 7 is very large. It goes all the way up to Northwest, it goes all the way over to 35 in Basswood. What their needs are up there is completely different than what y'all's needs are down here. Nobody knows the neighborhood better than y'all, who live here, who drive these roads every day. Nobody in the departments or anything else. So I think it's important when you have the West Side Alliance, when you have the Northwest Alliance, when you have all these alliances come together. A lot of these folks come from HOAs. They represent the people in their HOA. So, and I respect this from Carlos, who sits on city council. He's very active. In Northwest, he's always at the meetings. I respect that so much, because he comes and brings the plans and says, Northwest, what do y'all think? And we let him have it. I will tell him that. Like, we let him have it. We're like, we don't think this, this, and this. We give him our opinion, and he takes it to heart. And he takes it back to city, because that's what he's supposed to do, is represent the people he's there for. And when we talk about a city council, we're supposed to represent you, right? Well, I'm not gonna pretend I know everything that's gonna go happen on in District 7. It's so big. So if there's a project going down here, I wanna come talk to you. So we see this, right, White Settlement Road. There's some homes, there's about 6,000 homes that are gonna be going in. White Settlement Road is the major thoroughfare to get to I-30. Well, guess what? On the plains, there's no road to get to the highway. Can you imagine the traffic already? It already exists. There's so much traffic to begin with. If we had 6,000 more homes, it's gonna get even worse. So in those plans, we need to talk to the folks that live around there and say, what do you think? And I have, because I've door-knocked several houses, and they say, we need to add another road. If we're gonna allow all these houses, we need another road. And I love it. The folks that live there and drive those roads every day, they are the ones who shared that opinion, and I think that's important. But I think anybody who represents people need to go back to the people and talk to them, the folks that live in that neighborhood, to get their opinion, to be able to move forward on projects. I think it's super important.
Yeah, and I'm gonna echo there's a lot of agreement on this particular issue. I get doorbelling this weekend. That was probably my #1 response from people in the neighborhoods that I was in. The 7th district, like you said, is pretty broad, has a lot of the border area of the Northwest where a lot of the expansion is going on. North of the DFW area, and the northwest part of the DFW is going that way, and people are seeing that, and that's, in some ways that's nice, but in some ways it's difficult and not nice. So it depends on the day, on the moment, I suppose. 5 o'clock, it's not so nice. But that's what I'm hearing is, how do we still get around? How are we going to get around in 2 years and in 5 years when all this is coming in and the roads aren't ready for it? We need to build out the roads in advance, knowing the growth is there and is coming, and also having the growth, particularly up there, not be high density. So it's a little bit less as far as the traffic needs, because it's not quite so high dense, and keeping the neighborhoods the way they already are. The style of the neighborhoods is very nice. But building the roads out in advance of all the construction, I think is important for the city to focus on that. For property taxes and roads, those are actually my top 2 things that come up, and the top 2 things I'm running on is having the roads ready for the traffic before the traffic hits, rather than having shut down lanes after the traffic is in and make it even worse with these single lane roads that are halfway shut off, plus all the new construction. We need to flip that around in its head.
What is the city's role in supporting the arts? The cultural district is a key part of our West Side area. Currently, the city has a task force headed by Councilman Firestone about how to handle the need for repairs and updates for the Community Arts Center at 1300 Gendy. That's across from the Amon Carter. Repairs are estimated at $27 million or more. So what is the city's role in supporting that art project and art projects in general.
I'll, again, fall back on my political philosophy and describe that a little bit as to how I arrived at the answer of this. But I think the short answer is using tax dollars should be minimal for something like this. And here's my reasoning behind that, and I'll wrap around to the answer again at the end of it. But government should tax everyone the same and benefit everyone the same. That's, I believe, a staple to keeping good and effective government, is taxing everyone the same, benefiting everyone the same. There will occasionally be exceptions to that, but that still needs to be a rule that we strive for. From the federal government, state, city, I think the reason the federal government is in such a mess financially is because everybody breaks that rule. Every administration comes in, I've been watching politics since the 80s, and every administration, they have their pet things that they want to spend money on, and it's tough to raise money for it. It's way easier if you just take money out of the public treasury, because the taxpayers don't have a choice. And so you fund the things that really matter to you that way, and then the next guy comes in, he's like, I don't like those projects, but I want to fund this instead. And the next guy funds this instead, the next guy funds this instead, and pretty soon you're funding everything, and the government can't do that. If society can't function that way, and eventually it collapses. And the best way to guard against that is to benefit everyone the same. So the issue with spending it on something like an art center is not everyone benefits from the art center, because some people just aren't into that. And some people benefit a lot from it because they really like it. And I had the same conversation with sports arenas. Should we have public funding of big sports arenas or not? I love football and baseball. And so, therefore, if that's the only way to make it happen, should it happen? Ultimately, I think the answer is no. The billionaire owners should fund it themselves or with their friends, and they should do it that way. And so, if somebody's asking me for property taxes, I'm getting that all the time. I want property tax relief. And for me to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to take the money and use that for an art center or something that, whatever it is, it's only going to benefit a few people. And this person has no interest in that, but their tax money is being used for that. For me, that's a hard sell. And it seems like the government is overreaching. And if we get in that habit, that's what puts us where we are, especially on the federal level. But that can apply to city as well. So the city can facilitate things. There are certain things the city could do, but generally I would be opposed to spending tax dollars on something that only benefits a small segment of the population.
So the project you're talking about, it's very complex, right? So in city council, they actually put a task force together just to look into this a little deeper. Are you guys familiar with what's going on with that project? So it's very involved, right? So, and it's kind of interesting when you look, if you had the opportunity to go visit and go sit and listen to the task force and the committee that came together on that, it's pretty interesting on what was going on. And so, what's going on is there's a lease agreement, there's a contract, right? The city of Fort Worth pays $200,000 a year to Art Fort Worth to house that building, right? And so in that contract, you can look it up, this was at the task force, in that contract, in the lease agreement, it says that they're responsible for all the upkeep, all the responsibility for that building. And then we also allow up to $100,000 in the electricity bill every year. So what's interesting is when you watch that task force, the problem is they say 27 million in repairs. But if you look at the budget, it's not that, right? They're looking at renovations. It's not necessarily repairs. And they actually reference back to the contract, and Art Fort Worth was actually responsible for that. So when they proposed 3 different things, which this is coming up in May, right? So we're very short away from the city council actually voting on things like this. So they actually proposed 3 different things. We pay as we go and make repairs as necessary, or we make the leasee, the person renting that building, accountable and hold them under that contract to make those repairs. And the third option is wait till 2026 and put it up for bond. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. Like, if we put that up for bond, it's not going to pass, right? And I say that because the majority of District 7 is outside the loop. And we saw this happen in Eagle Mountain when we built the school. We're halfway through building. We needed extra funds to finish that school out, and the voters said no. When we live in a city that we have the highest tax rate in Tarrant County, every time there's a bond that comes up, outside the loop, they tend to vote no on it. So that's our 3 options that the task force proposed, right? And if you look at the budget, there's a lot of that is renovations, not repairs. So again, if you look at the budget, for instance, multi-millions of dollars were in the budget for repairs on plumbing. No, that's not repair, that's replacement. Same thing with the roof. I think it was $1.8 million to replace the roof. That's not correct. It's not repairs, that's a replacement. So we need to look at that budget and dig in a little bit deeper. And anybody with a construction background would be able to look at that budget and say, you know what, this isn't repair, this is replacement cost, right? So if we look at the actual repair cost, that's very much lower, about $6 million.
We live in the cultural district, and Fort Worth is Cowboys and Culture. I had the opportunity to go visit with Leslie Gentle, who's the executive director of the Arts Council, and asked him to walk me through the building and let me see exactly what's going on. So he took me down to the belly of the building. We have a spring down there. I had no idea. I heard about it, but I didn't actually get to see it before, and watch the pumps go up and down, and just hear about the history of the building. It's been there since 1954. I talked to Leonard, I've talked to several different city council members, and I think what it comes down to is that we are gonna have an arts community center at some point. We do now, but we'll continue to have one. And what that looks like, will probably end up being a public-private partnership, and some philanthropy dollars are gonna come into that too. Fort Worth is very generous. We come together when we need to come together, and I think there's an opportunity here to be able to collaborate with the community. I walked through some of the artist studios. We have artists in residence programs, and we're cultivating the next generation of artists. I hope to see those paintings in the Amon Carter or the Modern one day. So it was very inspiring to walk through there. The city council has agreed to extend and hear the task force recommendations, and hopefully they'll be able to hear it with the new city council. But Leonard seemed very positive that there could be a solution, and it would end up being probably a hybrid model. So I would support that.
And what city meetings have you personally attended? Zoning commissions, city council meetings, task force meetings? And what has your involvement been with Fort Worth city government?
I've had the unique opportunity through my career and being involved on the work on the ground before you even hear about it at a meeting. Like I mentioned before, working with Mayor Mike and Mike Moncrief and the Homelessness Coalition. I worked at the Presbyterian Night Shelter. I've had the opportunity to go and talk to the city council and sit down with task force members and talk about what I'm seeing on the ground. On the sports commission, I'm helping with bringing in economic development dollars, all these new organizations that are coming, the NCAA gymnastics that we just had here, working with the city and several different entities to make this all come together. It's not just going to hearing things at meetings, it's actually being part of the work, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, so I've been very active in local politics. I go to just about every city council meeting. I go to quite a bit of them. I don't know if I've ever seen that there actually. So, but I go to quite a few of them. Most of them, if I can make it. So, and again, I've been very active in local politics, worked on plenty of campaigns. So a lot of folks that, I have their cell phone in their personal number in my phone, so I do talk with them because I do like staying active. And it's important, right? Because that's the things that, again, affect our everyday lives. But when it comes to meetings and organizations, and then I talked about the Northwest Alliance, I'm there very actively too, because that, again, affects ours as the infrastructure. But again, city council meetings, I go to quite a bit. If you've never been, I suggest you go. It's pretty entertaining as well, so you get some pretty funny characters in there. So it's just worth the show if you decide to go.
Yeah, for me, I'm pretty involved in a number of local groups. As far as going to city council meetings, I generally watch them online. I have been in person, but I started the question, a while ago. It's like, should I start going more in person or not? And I decided, no, it's a better use of my time to be out talking to people directly and to going to other meetings such as this. Like there's this council meeting most Tuesdays, one way or another. But being out and meeting with people and hearing from them directly was probably a better use of my time. We went back and forth with that discussion actually a while ago with a couple other people too. And so that's what I'm doing, and really hearing from the people, I think, as far as what matters to you and how can I represent that on the city council. That has been my focus.
What is the role of neighborhoods, and not just HOAs, just to be picky here? HOA is like where you have to pay dues and you have to follow their rules. And then there are voluntary neighborhood associations where dues are voluntary. So the city makes a distinction between the two, but essentially they are neighborhood associations, all of them, that represent the interests of their residents. So what is the role of neighborhoods in city government?
Like I said, every part of the district's a little bit different. Every neighborhood's a little bit different. They bring something different to the table. And there's so many things that are going on in Northwest, right? District 7, we see some of the most growth that's out there. And I talk about the infrastructure all the time because the number 2 issues that I see at doorsteps when I'm knocking doors is property tax and the infrastructure and development, right? So I preach about the infrastructure because the infrastructure needs to be there before we allow more development. That's plain and simple. If the infrastructure can't support more development, then it doesn't need to happen. But that's where I say it's so important for neighborhoods to be involved because the voice is going to count. It's voices that count. If you go to a city council meeting, you'll see the same thing. If people sway their vote based on how many people show up, there's one person screaming and yelling, normally doesn't really do a whole lot. But when a neighborhood comes out together, that has a huge impact in city council, and people listen to that. But again, every part of the district is a little bit different. From where I live over by the lake is different than what White Settlement area is to what it is down here in Arlington Heights and everything else. Everybody's a little bit different and they have different needs. So I think, again, it's important that people come together in their neighborhood to be able to get things done that works for them.
So city council is supposed to be your advocate and listen to you, and that's the role of the neighborhood, is to come to your council member, your representatives in government, no matter what arm of that government is. And that's our role, is to listen to hear what you have to say. You're voting us in. We're supposed to be your advocate. We're supposed to fight for you in City Hall.
Hearing from the community, communication is probably a big role, because neighbors know what they like or don't like about what's going on, and the ability to communicate that to the city council people is critical. We heard a big deal just last week in Tejas Trails area where construction of one particular project was a big issue for them. Every community, every city has that. So getting together and talking, communicating, I think that's probably the biggest role there is. And getting out the vote. That kind of ties in with an earlier question.
How do you see Fort Worth integrating walkability and bike paths connecting to Arlington Heights and the Trinity River?
So I think it's important. So like my neighborhood, I live in Eagle Ranch, right? So we have this old golf course that used to be there. We have a bunch of trails. I love it. It's great for my kids and everything else. We get to participate, we get to go bike, we get to go hike. I love it. And District 7 is unique too because we have part of, we actually have 2 almost. But the Nature Preserve Center, that's huge in District 7 up by the lake. I love that. I love the outdoors. And I think it's important. But again, when I go back to every neighborhood's a little bit different and what's going to work in that neighborhood, where I'm at in Eagle Ranch, we don't need that, right? We already have it. So if you guys, again, if I come down to the West Side Alliance or the new River District Alliance that they're working on, and I say, what do you guys need? And they say, this is what's important to us and this is what we need. Well then, great. We need to address that situation. We need to address that and work on it. But like I said, a lot of areas already have a lot of these trails and everything else. But and like I said, by the lake, we have a ton of trails around the lake. So I think it's important. But again, it's all based on the needs of that specific neighborhood and area.
I don't have a great answer to this one because this is the first time I've heard this particular issue. I do have a related issue that comes up a lot with sidewalks, the ability to walk around the neighborhood on the streets and whatnot. And I really think that's an important thing. We've got an area up there where kids try to get to school and it's just a mess. So that's related to this. I would definitely be listening in a situation like this and hearing what people want to have. And the ability to get around is really nice. To be able to walk and to bicycle, especially on a day like this. This is why we moved to Texas. I moved here a number of years ago. It's like, this is not going on in the Pacific Northwest today, I tell you what. So being out and being able to enjoy that, to walk around, to bicycle around through your neighborhood and the area is really important. So I would look at ways to try to make that a part of the quality of life here in Fort Worth for sure.
That's a great question because it's an issue. I feel like the only ways you can get to the trail from Arlington Heights, you have to go down Bailey, and that's not really safe for you to run or bike. I'm a marathoner and I'm not training. quite often early in the mornings, and there's not a safe way to get to the trail without trying to get hit by a car. And going down Hidden Road, that's probably the only other way you can get down. And there's no really good place to bike. The hill is so steep, and so is Burton Hill. I think that's another trailhead area. So I think that's an opportunity for the neighborhoods to come together, and let's have a conversation about what people want, and how can we work with the TRWD and the trail systems to figure out how do we make that happen. And you know, as Camp Bowie has continued to be redeveloped, I know Mr. Goff, who owns the Crescent, is looking at pedestrian walkways, so we could make it a little bit more easier for us to walk down the street without making our mobility or the roadways any smaller. But that's another angle we can get down to the trail, is going down straight down East Lancaster. So I think there's several different routes we can work with, but I think that's an opportunity for the neighborhood again to come together and have a conversation about it.
Traffic in general and speeding more specifically, is an issue in the old Arlington Heights neighborhood. And I know that my Crestwood neighborhood, we have many complaints about people speeding and also running stop signs.
One, I think we need to have neighborhood meetings with the police department. We actually heard this the other night in another forum, that drag racing is a problem across the city, and the police cannot catch them. They may start over by Chapel Creek, and they'll come downtown, and they go up north. So that's an issue, and that's something the police are trying to address. By the time they get to the area they've been called, they're not there anymore. So that's one. Two, I think traffic studies, that's something that we need to revisit year after year as the city continues to grow. I live in Northcrest, and we have people fly down that hill, down Catalina Drive, all the time, and have run into fences, and especially going down Burton Hill. So I think that's, again, another opportunity for the neighborhoods to come together, and let's work with the police department.
Yeah, so it's important to reach out to your MPOs, right? Every neighborhood has an MPO. Just had a meeting with them the other day for our area, and they want to hear about it. So if we make a report about, say, somebody speeding down the neighborhood residential area, what they'll do is, even the MPO would do this, they'll go out and they'll watch that stop sign, for instance. They did that in our neighborhood. We called about it, our HOA, there was enough people that complained about it. MPO sat out there and he actually wrote tickets. Then that was across next door at Facebook. It got out there. Watch out for this stop sign. Cops are writing tickets. Like, it got out there really quick, but it actually helped. But I think the first step is contact your MPO, right? So, and then if you live in a HOA, whether you do or not, you're going to have an MPO, a neighborhood police officer. So, but if you live in a HOA, at least talk to them, because they're going to put it out there too. They're going to let everybody know. And then if they're sitting there writing tickets, it's going to stop it. It's at least going to slow it down. But it's a revolving door. It's going to happen, and it'll slow down. It's going to happen. If you put a stop sign or a red light, it's not going to make any difference, right? So people are going to break the law if they want to break the law. But at least if it with a police presence out there, it'll slow some of that down.
Yeah, and I'll add by talking about the drag racing, and I don't think it's, as I understand, happening right immediately around here very much. It is happening more recently, though, in Fort Worth in general. Maybe, I don't know if that has happened. Have you guys seen that happening? That when they take over the intersections, these usually younger guys, it's coming to Fort Worth.
Just a quick break.
Okay.
It routinely fairly often from our Crestwood neighborhood, we can hear it, and it is near the river. Who else can give a
University Drive.
University
Rockford
Drive
Park.
at the river, right where it becomes Northside Drive? That's a place that,
Okay.
the trouble is, they're already doing it, and by the time the word gets out and the police get there.
Right. And I just talked to a police officer for quite a while, actually, on Sunday afternoon about that. And he mentioned something I didn't realize, and I don't know if you might all already know this, but they are not allowed to pursue those. And I think that might be wise to change that so that they could use their discretion. We don't want high-speed chases if we can avoid them, but we also don't want high-speed races, which are even worse. And so sometimes they can't even surround them necessarily and stay within the limits of what they're allowed of the law for the rules for the police. So revisiting, talking with him for quite a while, revisiting this might be helpful, because if you could just crack down on a few of the guys, it could be girls too, but of the people, generally it's guys, that are doing it, then that could really make a difference. You really hit them hard, potentially fine them so much that they can't do it or even lose a car or something like that, then you knock down a few of those big cases, and I think it would definitely help with the drag racing. We could revisit that rule.
countywide voting. What is your thought about countywide voting versus only being able to vote in your precinct?
I do think we need to make voting more accessible. I was looking at the map for early voting and at voting day, and we don't have as many in Central City as we used to. There's quite a few up north and some west, but we don't have that many areas to vote anymore. I know I used to be able to go to North High Mount anytime I wanted to go vote. I think for early voting, we have to go all the way to the Como Community Center. So I think there's some opportunities there to expand our voting access.
During early voting, right, you can go anywhere, and then it's election time, you have to stick to your precinct. It's usually what it is. Yeah, so I mean, I don't understand what, do you want to narrow
Okay.
down?
That's my question.
Oh, okay.
Last night, or night before on the news, the county commissioners were reflecting on the fact that they could get better, verification of all the folks if they go precinct
I see what you're
wide.
saying, yeah.
But my concern is that you know, just like you said about being two people in two places to vote in the college brings more people, you know, to it. But it's also a deal about like what you just said. There's not as many here, and so it's easier. You know, if my job is over there, then trying to go back to my precinct to vote or you know whatever. My challenge is what do you think, and then how do we? I understand the need to have verification, but
Yeah.
It's still not exactly clear to me what your question is. Do you want to keep countywide voting or have it only be by precinct?
well, right now we're at countywide voting, so you could go to any voting station in the county. What they were talking about on the news was the fact that they are considering, because they want to make sure that we get the right, you know, identities, and you can do that best if they only vote within the precinct. So I just wondered, because there's fewer of them than there are you guys, so how do you influence, or what are your thoughts on making that work out?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because that's gonna be,
Precincts have the voter list for their precinct, the
Yeah.
county, I mean, you
yeah.
give their ID and they can.
So I think what, who is it, just stepped down from the, so we're gonna get somebody new that's gonna do this. Yeah, exactly, so, it'll be interesting. I'm not one of those people, the deniers. I'm not that person that's like, oh my God, our vote's got stolen. I mean, if you show an ID, they prove it to you, or like, so, whether or not it should be countywide or not, I would just have to talk a little bit more about that, because I'm not so familiar with that side of it. Because that's more based on, that'd be like our county judge and our commissioners, like they're the ones who do a lot with that, not necessarily us. Do you
But
know?
the city votes would be done similarly. In other words, you have to have separate locations, I was trying to follow it all last night.
Yeah, it's a lot,
I
yeah.
tossed it out there for a look at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah, and so we want to make sure that you have a secure system that when somebody wins, you know they actually won. When somebody loses, you know they actually lost. So the way Tarrant County does it is way better in my mind. I think Tarrant County runs a pretty good election. The concern I would have is if you're going anywhere in the county, are the different precincts talking to each other? So if you show up at one place, does everybody in the area know that you already voted? Or can you go 5 miles away and go vote there too because nobody else knows you already voted? And then it's actually somebody else under your name voting. So which one was the real you and which one was the fake you? Are they talking to each other? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think city council decides that.
It's electronic.
It's electronic, they scan, I've worked the voting form.
Okay, so
And
would that happen, do you know?
scan someone's license, and once you scan it, they can't go somewhere else and scan it again.
That's what I thought was the case, but I
It
wasn't
was
sure.
all
So-
good.
So she's saying it does do that. So in that case, I'm really not that worried about it. If they're talking to you about it and you're showing up and you show up somewhere else, the in-person way we do it with the verification and the signature, I think it's a pretty solid system. I would like to be able to perhaps audit it occasionally afterwards, but as long as that is taken care of, then the ability to vote in different places within the same county, I think, is not a big concern for me.
The city recently removed the teen curfew. What is your position on whether there should or should not be a teen curfew?
As a mom of 2 teen boys, I would love to have a curfew to fall back on, and I think that's very helpful. And I think the police department would too. I think it's helpful for them to have an excuse to send kids home when they need to go home. So that's my answer. I have a 17-year-old almost and a 14-year-old, and there's a reason they should be home before midnight.
Agreed. I was a teen at one point. Like, there's no good business happening past midnight, so I'm gonna have to agree on that one.
Actually, at the last city council meeting, I've said I haven't been in very many in person, but the last one I was at in person, this topic was debated back and forth, and I actually was a little torn. I ended up changing my mind at the end of it, and I ended up now agreeing with both of what they said. I think I do favor the curfew. The way it's being treated is that if the kids are found, they're said, hey, you guys just go home. And if they're not out being bad, they're just sent home. It's late, they should be at home or at their friend's house or somewhere, but not wandering around the streets. So I think the way it's being used is effective. It does help the police, and it helps the parents a little bit too.
Homelessness and people loitering around is an increasing issue.
I think people shouldn't be allowed to live on the streets. It's harmful for everybody. You look at whether it's Dallas or Portland or Seattle or San Francisco, LA, people living on the streets, and I don't mean just hanging out for a few hours, but people living there, they sit there and die in front of people, and it's horrible. There's some people who think it's compassionate to let them stay there. It's not. It's really bad. It's bad for the city, it's bad for them. Everybody loses in that situation. So people shouldn't be allowed to live on the streets, and they need to be helped by somebody and be in some of the situation with friends or with family or a church group or mission or treatment center or something. So I think that's really an important thing that a lot of cities get wrong, and it damages the city to have people that are just living on the streets, and particularly when drugs are involved or mental illness, which it usually is if it's a long-term situation, almost always is if it's a long-term situation. So that shouldn't be allowed to happen.
So that's a complicated issue. So a lot of folks, and I get it, right? Some people are dealt a bad hand, right? So some people that end up on the streets, like my heart goes out to them. Maybe they didn't want to be there. But on the same hand, on the same token, there's some people that's their lifestyle. They don't want to change. That's what they're going to do, and that's what they want to be, and that's one thing. And so it's so hard and so diverse. I believe that we should have resources for the folks that want to get help. And just I would help my neighbor out, kind of thing, right? So as a city, I want to help folks out, but there's a point and there's a breaking point when if somebody doesn't want any help because that's their lifestyle and that's the way they want to live, where do you call it quits, right? And so what happens is, especially up here too, because I get a lot of phone calls out of this area, is that, the homeless are kind of moving in. They're pushing this way slowly, and that becomes a safety hazard and everything else because, some folks may be on drugs or addicts. But again, if we can try to give them help, and then again, some people don't want that, that's a lifestyle, but I do appreciate and I do believe that we should at least try to help and then let them make that decision, whether they want to be helped or get back up on their feet.
So I think the last homeless count was done a couple months ago, and we have 2,700 homeless in Fort Worth. The good news is we have some really great resources and great partnerships citywide. We have the Tarrant County Homeless Coalition, Presbyterian Night Shelter, Day Resource Center, Union Gospel Mission, the Salvation Army. We have churches that step forward and do a lot for these homeless on the streets. I think we have some really great partnerships with the executive directors of those organizations, and this is a great example where Fort Worth actually comes together. So we have our police departments, they know who the chronically homeless are, they know the ones that are mentally ill, and we have some opportunities for permanent supportive housing to get those off the streets that want to make a difference and get out of homelessness and help find jobs. That's the great thing about Fort Worth. But on the public safety side, being in constant contact with the police, as I mentioned, they do know who the chronically homeless ones are, they know who the dangerous ones are, and being in contact with them and making sure that they know to contact Toby Owen at Presbyterian Night Shelter and say, you know what, I saw this individual on the side of the street, what do we need to do to get them help? And so it's that community effort to help us cure homelessness in Fort Worth.
What would you do to improve the drainage system and address the flooding issues? So hang on, that's now another version of this. What is your opinion of and your proposed solution to the floodplain issue with building the new city council chamber? Okay, so now we have a specific about the city council. There isn't enough room in the old Pier 1 building for what we need. So, well, the comment here is, I say scrap the chamber and quit wasting my money. I'm not sure I'm getting all these together, but they do seem to have kind of a foot. Now, there's one more, and this one's an even bigger one. The Panther Island boondoggle has been around for 20-plus years. Welcome to the party. Today, for all necessary flood control projects in all of Fort Worth, the monies will now fund Panther Island. And I think all of you saw the diversion of funds. Okay, but this goes on. It was never about flood control. The Corps of Engineers estimated levee repair 20-plus years, also at 10 million. Today, the project has ballooned to 1.4 billion, with a B, under the guise of flood control. Federal funding stopped in 2018 when the vision for developers was exposed. What will you do to help mitigate the flooding in all of District 7? So that brings us back to the flooding that's not like from the river, but the flooding in the communities, with nothing going to this pet project. And you can see there's lots of hot feelings about the Panther Island project, until neighborhood, just a second, infrastructure is repaired or replaced.
So it's no secret, when you create a development, we add more concrete, we add more roads, that creates more runoff, it can't saturate into the soil, into the dirt, right? So that goes into the big picture. When we allow these developments, we look at the overall picture. When we say infrastructure, it means more than just roads. It means the storm drains, it means the power grid, it means our schools. There's so much that goes into it. And so that's one of the issues. When we look at developments, we gotta look at every little piece of the pie, right? There's so much that goes into it. So we have that. We have the Panther Island Pavilion, which, oh my gosh, don't get me started on that. I could talk hours and I only have 3 minutes. So it's been corruption, right? There's no secret behind that. And I will say this, is we're tired of the corruption within the water board and within the city council, right? And we don't need that to mix, right? We can attest to this because James Hill, your husband, is on the water board. That's a big issue in District 7. We have 2 lakes. In District 7, we have Lake Worth, we have Eagle Mountain. Eagle Mountain is owned by the water board. Lake Worth is ran by the water board. We have the River District, and we have a ton of property that's ran by the water board, right? So if, hypothetically, if makes you have to recuse yourself with any vote that has anything to do with the water board. Like, that's not a secret at all. If you've been in any city council meeting, you'll see several city council members have to recuse themselves because their spouses are involved in development of their projects. So the next question would be, so we got development, we got the water,
City Hall, maybe?
the city hall. My priority will always be the property owners and the taxpayers. Like, we're building Taj Mahal downtown, right? So did we need that? Did we need that? And this happens government-wide again with all the projects that we do. It's no surprise that if we do a project and we bid on a project and we approve it, by the time we approve it to break ground, it's been a year plus. The budgets go over. We see this constantly. We saw that with the Eagle Mountain ISD school building, right? So then what did they say? Let's go do a bond. That didn't pass because taxpayers are tired of spending more money. So it's a constant thing. There's no surprise that City Hall went over budget. Is anybody else surprised? I'm not surprised. Every project that we do in the city of Fort Worth goes over budget. So again, but we're building Taj Mahal just for city council. And again, my priority will always be the taxpayers and the hard-working people of Fort Worth.
Yeah, so on the flooding issue, that, I do know something about flooding from my business of selling, among other insurance, flood insurance for quite a number of years, with a lot of homes and floodplains and building floodplains. And I had one project that they built this large commercial center and somehow hadn't accounted for the floodplain properly, and they had to stop building it. And it was just a strange situation. And so I wonder, I guess a lot of this is water under the bridge, no pun intended, but I don't know if it's flooded water under the bridge, whatever the case may be. How did all these things happen? But having somebody who's got some experience with the idea of flooding and how to mitigate it, how to watch for it and be prepared in advance for a lot of these things, whether you have to raise it above the A floodplain or B or C or actually whatever floodplain it may be, and how to work around that is important. I do think there's a little bit of an issue with the water board and the city council with having 2 spouses potentially having to rule both on prominent boards in the city Would Macy have to recuse herself? I think that could be relevant, especially when you've got a fairly evenly divided board like we have politically. There could be some big issues where we might lose an important vote. That could be an issue that would be worth considering, and there's really sometimes no way to get around that situation if you have to do that. And so I would be an independent voice that wouldn't have to have that situation.
When you say politically, what do you mean there, when we're so divided politically?
Oh, sure. Like a lot of the votes are 5-4 right now in the city council, particularly the controversial or the big votes. A lot of them have been very close. And so if you lose that fifth vote, which potentially one of us could be coming out of the 7th district, then that would be a bummer to have that happen. I don't know how often it would happen. There's really no way to predict that exactly going forward, but it could be. And so it'd be nice if that wasn't an issue.
Well, let's address the flood issue first. So I know we all saw the Fort Worth report come out about the potential movement around of money and projects to go towards Panther Island. I think it's important to know there's 14 different flood projects going on right now. 2 of those are already completed, so residual monies left over from those would actually go back. And this is an agreement, partnership made with the City of Fort Worth, TRWD, the Corps of Engineers back in 2013. So I don't think there's going to be a huge impact on our issues that we have in Arlington Heights, Crestwood. I know there's some projects online for that too. North Crest has had some issues as well. So I think the city is very aware, and so the city council, of the potential issues with that. But this has been planned, and I'm curious to see what council will say at the next meeting. But I think that I'm not that concerned about that. When we're looking at City Hall, we're spread across 15 different buildings. All of our departments are 15 different buildings. So there is some upkeep issues that we have and the cost of living at 15 different buildings. I think it was the prior city council when they were reviewing the City Hall options, building was going to be insurmountable. It was going to be way too much. When the Pier 1 building came online and was available, it seemed to be the right solution at the time. I know construction costs have increased and we have to add on to it a little bit, but I do think that was probably the right call at the time. The Fort Worth Police Association is going to be moving into our current city hall, so that building will be repurposed. So I think the city is trying to approach it from as responsible as they can for development and cost-wise. But things have changed, and the cost of living and the cost of goods has increased tremendously.
What is your position on building the new training center for police in Tarrant County?
I think that's a continual conversation we need to have with the county and the city. I'm endorsed by the Fort Worth Police Association, and I think I have a very good relationship with them. So I think as a city council member, I would work with them, listen to our other city council, and really understand what the police need, the size of the building they need, and what that looks, and how that would increase the amount of cadets we could get through.
I was in the military, right? So nobody can relate better to any police officers than me. And so I was also sit on the board of a nonprofit organization that helped train first responders. So again, when I say I'm budget minded, I want to see what the actual training facility is, because I think it's important that police have training, but quality training, right? When I was in the military and I was in the infantry, all we did was train. We actually only did our job when we deployed to Iraq. When we're back home, we don't do nothing but train. So I believe in quality training. But I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into it, I'm not gonna lie. So Haltom City, for instance, I'll take them for reference, they utilize TCC. They use them in exchange. What they do is they provide a police officer, they help train, and they get to use part of their facility. And so I think that's a pretty good partnership, right? So, but again, I'd have to dig into it a little bit deeper before I really have an opinionated mind on it. But again, I'm very budget minded. So if they have a facility, I believe in training, but I believe in quality training. So if we need more, I get it. But I will say this too, in the police officers world, right, they're having a hard time recruiting more people anyways. So I don't know what the academy is, how many people are pushing through that school. If they need more training, I don't know, because I haven't been able to sit down and actually dig into it that deep.
On this particular topic, I don't have a specific opinion yet. I don't have enough information to have a good answer. And so I won't try to give you a made up one on the spot. My overall philosophy, as I mentioned before, though, is the primary role of government is to protect rights, and the police are the tip of the spear in doing that and stopping those people who are seeking to harm us. They need to be well trained. Will this facility help in doing that? It might. Is it going to be a waste of money or not the most effective use of money? And as a business guy, everything I look at is this what's the the return on investment, the ROI on this, is it gonna be worth it? It may not be worth it, I may end up opposing it, but it might be worth it too, and because that is, like I said, the tip of the spear in protecting our rights. So, I don't know yet, but that's how I would approach it to come to a good answer.
It's time to invite our candidates to wrap up, give a summary.
I know where I'm coming from politically, and I've been involved in a lot of these discussions and topics for many, many years. And so, you know what you'll be getting if I'm in city council, and I always shoot straight with people. I came from an area a number of years ago where I believe city government, specifically city government, has really destroyed the cities of the Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Eugene, Olympia. And I don't want to see that happen here. I don't want bad city government. I got away from that on purpose, and I don't intend to see it follow me here. So when somebody said, hey, there's an opening, why don't you consider running? It's like, all right, I think I will. So that's why I'm here, and I would hope to represent you proudly in City Hall. Thanks.
So I actually want to work on the things that affect our everyday lives, right? One thing I did, if you go to my website, jasonellisforfullwork.com, my cell phone's on there. Call me. I want to hear your concerns. I want to hear what issues you have. Any literature that's left at your door, my number's going to be on there because I believe in transparency. When I got into this was a way I could actually work on the things that affect our everyday lives. And when you look up here, you're going to have to make a choice. Who do you think is going to stand up for you? Who do you think is going to be a voice for you? Who do you think is going to answer the phone when you call? And who do you think is going to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty and willing to actually work for the people? Again, my priority is always going to be the people, the hardworking people of Fort Worth, and the taxpayers.
I'm here to improve the quality of life in Fort Worth. We have a great city. I want to keep it that way. I want to be your voice at City Hall. I want to fight for what you want. We need to listen to the neighborhoods. We must take care of our existing neighborhoods first, and that is my priority. You know, we have so many issues we've talked about this evening, everything from infrastructure to public safety to property taxes, flood control. So I love the surprise questions, those are great. But when it comes down to it, we all just want a great place to live, to work and retire. And that's my goal, is to be your advocate and fighter in City Hall.
Well, let's say thank you. We appreciate it.